Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, again, a very important topic that we have chosen to talk about is about the Indian warmongering. It's about the Indian support towards terrorism in Pakistan. And we all know, and we have presented so many dossiers to the right authorities to look into them. Basically, India wants this region, in particular Pakistan and Afghanistan, to be destabilized. This is what suits them. This is what exactly they want in that region. Now, as long as the things are settling down, they're opposing the Afghan regime of Pakistan. And look at the latest, this wave of terrorism in Pakistan, where we have lost so many soldiers, especially the men in uniform were the targets. Or you talk about the CPEC in general, that is again another target. Now, what exactly do they want? According to our special representative and the ambassador in the United Nations, Munir Akram Saab, he says that India has always nuclearized the Indian Ocean. Now, ever since we have heard about this concept of Quad, or lately the AUKUS, and then the development that took place, if you remember, for the first time, the Quad meeting was held in the United Nations, where everyone, all the concerned members were there. AUKUS was earlier announced. And the kind of aim and objective that the Americans have is basically to counter China and its allies also. So where do we fit in? Where do we stand? That is something pretty tricky, and one should understand. Well, as far as Pakistan is concerned, Munir Akram Saab further stated that Pakistan will continue with the full spectrum deterrence. This is a very clear-cut message. And lately, there was another very interesting incident that happened on the line of actual control, and that is between China and the Indian state. How is it going to affect the region? Again, something very important to ponder upon. And then when we talk about these statements coming from China, normally they used to give very, I would say, docile statements. They would always talk between the lines, but recently, if you look at the statements coming from the Chinese spokespeople, you will understand one thing, that they are openly now challenging the aggression of the Americans or its allies. And when it comes to India, I think whatever has happened, but the Chinese, they do understand that what sort of a threat is posed by the Indians. Now, to talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Brigadier Retired Syed Nazir Saab, Senior Analyst in our studio. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you indeed.
And on Skype from India, we have Mandeep Singh Bajwa Saab. He's a Senior Journalist. Bajwa Saab, pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And we have with us Uqab Malik Saab. Dr. Saab is an expert on foreign affairs. Thank you so much, Dr. Uqab, for your time. So pleasure to have both of you gentlemen in our program. Now, let me start off from you, Brigadier Said. Now, when we say that India is a threat for the peace and prosperity of the region, and now perhaps on the behest of the Americans, they believe that they can take on China and perhaps take on Pakistan at the same time. This is what General Bipin Rawat, the head of their defense when he was the Chief of Army Staff, used to say also. Now, sir, latest development that include the Quad element, or perhaps the AUKUS now. AUKUS is a separate chapter, we'll come to that because that has got nothing to do with India. But at some stage, so when we see Quad, and especially the meeting that was recently held in the United Nations, when they went and met the President of America, and they had a very comprehensive meeting out there. Now it seems, sir, that there is a clear-cut division. Perhaps I will definitely be talking to you about the clash of civilizations, but currently, sir, do you believe that the kind of support, whether it's coming in from France or Britain or United States of America or Japan or Australia or otherwise, sir, for the Indians, and especially in the context of the military, do you think, sir, they'll be able to take on China? Because on the Independence Day of Chinese Taipei, which the world called Taiwan, so about more than 5 dozen jets flew all around the area, and that was the day of their independence. So what I'm saying is that the Chinese, they were very mellow, they were very docile. No, sir, it's a different China altogether. Your take.
Thank you indeed. It's a big question, and there are so many dimensions to it. But at the same time, once we analyze the history of India, it was at loggerhead with Pakistan once Bangladesh was created through the Mughni Bahni, which was supported by the Modi mindset And he clearly said it that yes, we did it. Then goes to the insurgency which they brought in Sri Lanka. And 23 years they were fighting against the Tamils. And Tamils, of course, whose childs they were, and actually, finally, they were to lose their leader again at the hands of the same very outfit which they were feeding. And third is, of course, the small states like Bhutan and Sikkim and the way they are, Nepal, the way they are treating them. Fourth is China. Of course, Pakistan is their arch enemy. But China, once they used to say China in the bye-bye, and now the way this belligerence has come to the line of actual control, it was not only Doklam, now it has come to the Ladakh, and in Ladakh, India has moved almost more than a division of forces. And beside that, the Devlet Beg village, which has been almost developed to a sort of brigade-size force, besides the air landing strips and all sort of offensive weaponry placed there. So all these speaks that probably on the behest of their masters or their supporters, or the way the bulwark is being created against China. You are talking of two front war, they used to talk of 2.5 front war, because they were including the Kashmiris as well. So a weapon who is fighting against their generals are fighting on this particular issue, that whether Air Force is a supporting arm or a fighting arm, this row is between the army and between the Air Force. So what to talk of their strategic thought and the way they want to say that we will be.
I recently, in fact, saw an interview of their air chief, and he was also, talking about bringing in new military power and, getting rid of the obsolete weaponry.
And then flying
same as the case. And then, now they need to, and perhaps they're working on the new narrative, on the new sort of, the way they have to deal with the regional players, I would say. So a lot is happening on that front.
So actually, China is a sort of bogey created by all these powers, and now India is put on the forefront, including the Quad.
So the Americans have never ever fought a war except for the Independence War, remember, sir?
Yeah.
And there were just two attacks that took place. So one was 9/11, a very dubious kind of incident. So the case was the Pearl Harbor, in order to achieve the the supremacy over the world, sir, after bombing Japan. Now, sir, if you allow me, I'll bring in Mandeep Singh Bajwa Saab. Now, Bajwa Saab, honestly speaking, when we talk about neighbors, I've been to India once, and honestly, I really liked India. And I was in Delhi, and obviously we couldn't walk that freely because there were a lot of intelligence people all over the hotel and everything there. But what I'm saying is that I really felt as if, everything was so similar. So this is the kind of gesture a normal Pakistani would have about the Indians. Because we grew up watching the Indian movies and listening to their songs and everything, we all thought that, we eat the same food, we have similar ways of life. I mean, so many identical features. But, sir, recently, ever since Narendra Modi got into power, sir, this RSS phenomena, and on top of this extremist agenda that the government of RSS or BJP is following, sir, that has not only hurt the Muslims living in India, sir, but the minorities. And honestly speaking, sir, India is no more a democratic state, sir. It is an authoritative kind of a state where one set of rules that are being applied on everyone, and especially after the CAA and also the abrogation of the Article 370 in Kashmir, sir, things have really taken a very different twist and turn during the last 2 years. Where is this region heading, sir? How do you see this entire situation unfolding in the future? Your take.
Well, there are difficulties. I mean, there are problems in India. There are, there are vast political differences between the opposition and the ruling party. Civil society is up in arms on many issues. The ruling party also have their own share of grievances, many of them imaginary or self-created. But talking of the subcontinent, about South Asia, I'm quite optimistic I mean, there's been a ceasefire along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir, which has held, and there has been no major incident between the two countries, between India and Pakistan, for the last more than a year, and there is a room for optimism. I mean, of course, there are these pinpricks, these irritants, and other problems will always be there. I mean, between the best of countries, I mean, look at the row going on between France, Australia, and the US, who are closest of allies, not just friends or partners, they're allies. So these problems will remain. I mean, you can't just wish them away. But otherwise, I find that there is room for optimism. I mean, we haven't had any major incident or any big problem for the last year or so. And I think as time goes by, and depending on the goodwill between the two countries, and particularly the governments on both sides, and their strategic interests, whatever they feel is best for them in the future, I think we can certainly move forward towards a common agenda. In saying, I mean, look at the, I give you the case of France and Germany. I mean, who could have been greater enemies than both countries? I mean, twice in 25 years, within a quarter of a century, France was occupied by the Germans. I mean, only in during the Second World War, and to a large extent in the First World War, and murderous hatred between two countries, and now France and Germany have a joint army formation. So I think there is room for optimism, and I don't think that current sort of strident right-wing, the shrill campaign run by the right wing will last very long. I mean, elections are due in 3 years' time, and certainly there could be a change, and a new government could come in. And on the whole, I'm optimistic that.
But that's great to be optimistic, sir. I think hope is perhaps the best thing one can even think of. But interestingly, sir, you gave the example of Germany and France. But these two countries, they have fought for so long, sir. And once this whole phenomena of war that existed in Europe, that moved out of Europe at some stage. Countries did realize after whatever happened during the First World War and then after the Second World War. But now the question is, sir, do you think that after whatever has happened in 1940s, now India being the second largest in the population, spending almost 75 billion a year on their defense, being a poor country, that is your internal issue perhaps. But our concern, primarily when we talk about Pakistan, sir, is that India is a nuclear power, so are we, so is China. It's a very complicated region. We are all members of SCO where there are 4 nuclear powered countries. And then at the same time, when we say that India is being prepared by the Western world to counter China. I'll just give you one example, sir. Whatever happened in Afghanistan and the way the Americans literally rushed out of that place, they escaped perhaps. I mean, so much has been written and has been shown on the television screens that, we are all witness to it. Do you still believe that America can be trusted against the kind of odds which we have in the region, sir? And especially when the Indians are being supported militarily by the French, by the Americans, perhaps by so many other countries. And now the shift is towards the West. But sir, we all understand about the 4 lines of India, about the issues that still prevail, whether you talk about the chicken neck and the east of that part, or you talk about Khalistan, or you talk about the extreme south, the Tamil area, you talk about Kashmir, I mean, Nagaland, there's a long list. Do you think, sir, such an adventure would be pretty challenging for the Indians, sir, even if there's a Cold War-like situation?
Are you asking me?
Yes, sir. Ajwa, sir. Yes, Ajwa.
There, of course, there are a lot of worries and the same. And well, as you pointed out, the Americans left Afghanistan in a hurry. One doesn't know. What their game plan is, and there could be something behind it. Let's see what unfold in the future. The Americans are known to keep their cards close to their chests. And let's see what comes out in the future. And as for China, well, China is in a big hurry, and expansionism is their current motto, and they're expanding into the Indian Ocean, towards big footprint in Africa and in the Middle East also. And that is the reason for worry for the entire region, because the Chinese are not exactly benign sort of interlopers or whatever, and wherever they go, they do create discord. I mean, just look at it. I mean, I think possibly Pakistan is the only one of its neighbors with which China does not have a territorial dispute, and they have made no attempt whatsoever in the last 60 years to solve any of the territorial issues, whether it's Vietnam or with Myanmar, particularly with India, with Russia, and they've been the war with Vietnam in '79, clashes with Russia in the Soviet Union at that time in '69, war with India, the clashes again in '67, near war situation in '86, '87. Then the clashes again last year. So the Chinese make no mourn the fact that their interests are supreme for them, and they're not interested in peaceful relations with anybody in their neighborhood. So
all right. Now coming to you, Dr. Kab Malik. Now we all know that there was a war between India and China in 1962, and then later on in 1965, Pakistan and India had a clash, and there were issues and there were problems. Now, my point is that, sir, it's 2021 now. Look at the kind of spending the Indians have as far as their defense is concerned. Aim to become not the regional hegemonic player, I would say, becoming a superpower. This is what the Indians believe, because obviously at the end of the day, second largest population, but perhaps a lot more needs to be done and they need a lot of time. But so looking at the current equation in the region, the formation of Quad, the formation of AUKUS, the kind of money they plan to spend, and the kind of, encountering China strategy that seems to be there in the South China Sea. But sir, preparing India in the long run, to counter China. That is their objective, perhaps with the Western support that seems to be there. But sir, one important point, and that is, will India do it? What if they don't do it? And what if they do? Your take.
I think that it's a very complex situation, and it's very difficult to announce exactly what's going on, because much of it's behind closed doors. However, we get an understanding by what's going on by trying to read and understand and appreciate the global realities as they are and the directions that particular countries take against each other. And this is what I try to do. So my take on it is that you can't always listen to what the governments are saying about each other in a conciliatory manner, whilst also preparing for the worst as they see it. I think that every particular government sees the other government as a potential threat, especially when they challenge global power. And this is what the West thinks that the Chinese are going to do. Given the fact that China is rising so fast economically and will surpass the United States in the next decade or two, in many other ways as well. I think the United States, as well as the Western allies, are very much hesitant and apprehensive about the potential threat that China faces. But this is a potential threat, and it's not really in existence at this moment in time in real terms. I think it's more a preparation, and the AUKUS, as well as the Quad, all these multilateral institutions that are being developed by the United States with other parties, for example, the Indians and Japanese, the Australians, the British, in various different ways, are there to be able to counter the Chinese rise. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The issue here with India, however, is that they've always had this underlying feeling of non-alignment since partition and since their independence. And I think underneath the politics that is happening within India, there's still a feeling of apprehension that they're going to go too far into the U.S. Influence, the sphere of influence, in essence, and they may not have that much or that degree of independence of action in the future when they're riled up in a potential conflict with China, which they will have to act upon because they are allies. The way that balance of power systems work is that allies, in particular set of powers who are in agreement with each other about a potential situation that occurs with another set of powers, may be forced to fight a conflict, even though they don't actually want to, because of the agreements that are made, because they have long-term implications. And I think that India is very hesitant in this in real terms. There's been a lot of talk about it. And I think that India, in essence, wants to feel that it's independent and wants to have its own future in its own hands, as it has done for centuries, except for when it was colonized. Problem here is that the world doesn't wait for what other countries want. The superpower in charge of the world at this moment in time wants to maintain its power. And in doing so, will try to galvanize support within India, and has been doing so successfully to a large degree, to counter the rise of China. And the border issues are just one tiny aspect of that. There are much more geographically pronounced and significant issues in the Indian Ocean, for example, keeping the Malacca Strait open, having access to trade, influencing countries around Africa on the Indian Ocean, and the littoral states on the other side, on the eastern side of the Indian Ocean. India has an inherent interest in trying to control this. In fact, India is also trying to push the idea that it wants total control of all seas around its borders, coastal resources within 1,000 miles, which goes against, obviously, the Law of Sea Convention 1982. However, having said that, it is in a particularly vulnerable position as well. I find that India's best options are to have a certain form of bilateral engagement with the Chinese to resolve any potential issues. Now, if you find that the major issue between India and China is that border issue in eastern Ladakh province or that region in the Western Himalayas, then if they can resolve that, you may find there's a shift. As Mandeep was saying, there could be a shift in the future towards India having lesser relations with the United States because it feels that it may be pushed into a significant conflict, which could be devastating for both countries. And I think that the United States has used other countries to engage in its own operations and conflicts for its own benefit. And India is another party to that. However, that relationship that it's been building with the United States over the past few years is becoming more.
I'll get back to you on that, but so let me also engage Brigadier Saab here now. Brigadier Saab, a couple of very major developments. I mean, we have seen what would happen in the area which we call Ladakh or the eastern Ladakh, or perhaps along certain other bordering area between the Indians and the Chinese. Now, when you talk about these two forces, sir, well equipped, well trained, on the border, ready for any action. I'm not saying that India can attack China or the Chinese will attack India, but sir, vulnerability is always there. When you talk about the capability of a country, that takes time, and we understand the kind of capability the Chinese have, or perhaps the Indians also have a lot. But sir, the intentions can change overnight. There comes some sort of a support or a telephone call from somewhere and, some sort of a misadventure. Now, my only fear for the region is that Americans, as I earlier mentioned, sir, that they have never fought any war on their own soil, except for the War of Independence. And then there was this one attack, which we call the attack on their southern fleet, in which almost 3,000 people died, and later on a similar number of people died in 9/11 attacks. What was the reason? That is a separate chapter, sir, because that is so debatable, just like the landing on the moon. But my point now is, sir, that do you think that the Americans now, since they really want the Chinese, to be contained or put a check on their growth, South China Sea's destability is one challenge, sir. That is why the Chinese are looking on the western side. CPEC, because creating a problem in Pakistan suits the Americans as well as the Indians. Instability in Afghanistan also suits them, so that there is no energy corridor, there is no, again, sort of an OBO idea, or a BRI as they call it. And then on top, sir, when we talk about three nuclear powers almost connecting each other, and the main connection, to be very honest, is Kashmir, if you look at it.
Yeah, the Himalayan giants there.
The Himalayas. My question, sir, is very simple, and is that at some stage, if India plans for a misadventure, because the way they are looking at it, the way they are getting themselves energized, what sort of a message is it for the regional countries, number one, and especially for the people of India, sir, whom I really like, because most of the Indians are really decent people. But there are certain factions which are extremist, and they are very obvious as well. But it seems that very few are controlling the masses. And that is something very unfortunate for the region. And perhaps that could lead or trigger something that is going to go beyond the control of the Western world and of the region, sir. Because once one bullet is fired, there is no stopping. You yourself, you have served in the forces, and you know it better, sir. So that kind of a situation where the Americans can support their military industrial complex, keeps on working, keeps on generating money, and do whatever eventually they can do in the region, sir. Your take?
Actually, in this big game, which is being played now in Asia and especially around China, and Pakistan being a neighbor of India as well as China. So, of course, it has got its due strategic importance, and at the same time, it is a road to the world's the connectivity, especially to the energy corridors. Once we talk in that perspective, see the Indian history. Previously, they were milking the Soviet Union cow, and all sort of weaponry was given to them, and especially the vetoes in the Security Council on the Indian side, which came from the Soviet side. So Pakistan was at that time, of course, on the side of the Americans, and all those vetoes into agreements were there. But India was on the one side non-aligned, third world country leader, and on the other hand they were milking the Soviet Union cow on the weaponry and on the support, friendship treaty. Second thing is now they want to, because their particular source has dried up, so now another source they have found, and that is the American cow. They want to milk it. India mindset, Nazi mindset, will never slaughter the cow, they will milk it always, because it is against their dogma. That is one. Second thing is that once this bulwark is complete, and they are being armed from teeth to tail with all sorts of sophisticated weapons, the way the agreements are taking place, the nuclear agreement, second is the BECA agreement,
yeah.
And third is this Quad which is coming. So three of strategic nature agreement. More so, America has also shown its cards to Pakistan and China that they will be revisiting the policy. Policy have already revisited. India is a strategic partner, and Pakistan is just being engaged. And China is, of course, now their enemy. So the lines have been already drawn. In this drawn line, if India, for a certain period, could milk the American cow and the Western cow and get this nuclear submarines, plus these interoperability in the BECA, all sort of intelligence, satellite,
Intelligence sharing,
everything, logistics and everything. So naturally, once the time will come that America will be using it, the way they ran out from Afghanistan, they will be running out from the Americans.
So if you look at the
this
American
is a
history,
double
sir, this is
game.
not the first time.
This
that
is
has
a double jeopardy which is being played on the American. One, as you see, the Indian policy is always to remain a spectator. They were a spectator in Afghanistan.
But they won't remain as a spectator in this case, sir. They'll be the major players.
No, that's what you pointed out, that if a misadventure or miscalculation occurred on the western side, that is Pakistan, or on the Chinese
So
side.
then, one more question.
So that
Why
makes
is
the
there
difference.
so much of urgency of getting new weapons, like, for example, the way they got Rafales, right? And then more weaponry from USA, perhaps F-23s, the new version of F-16s or F-21s, again another version, or looking at the kind of technology they want to have in India so that they can manufacture everything inside India, or Tejas, or the kind of support they're getting in terms of BrahMos from the Russians, or S-400, and there's a long list. The point is, sir, basically that is too much for Pakistan. I mean, the way the Indians are preparing. Obviously, we have always
There is no convention and
comparison, absolutely. But when it comes to to a level where one has to take a decision, we all know, and we have been very clear, and we understand what we have to do. But sir, the urgency of the Indian military men at the top, General Babbitt, their naval chief, their army chief, their air force chief, they're in a hurry. It seems that they're in a hurry to occupy whatever they can, occupy whatever they can buy, whatever kind of military assets they can have, over there. Primarily, they believe that, it's about the Indian Ocean. And as it is said that whoever controls the Indian Ocean controls the world, so it's not a joke. So that is where the problem seems to be. And the other problem seems to be, again, another sea, the South China Sea. One is going to be handled by the AUKUS group. One is going to be given to Indians in the form of Quad. Now, what is that supposed to mean for the region, sir?
Actually, you see, India has got its own aim. Number one is the NSG. They want to be a member of that. They want to an entry into that club, which was really created in 74 against the Indian illegal detonation. That is one. But the world is suffering from the memory loss. Second thing is, they want to remember. Yeah. The second thing is, they want to be a member of the Security Council. Once they are using up with the power, with the Western technologies and all those weaponry which they are accumulating. And third thing is, of course, which you mentioned, that is the Indian Ocean. They wanted that it should be the exclusive zones of India, where they could control the Malacca Strait, as well as the Hormuz, as well as the complete Arab Peninsula.
The string of pearls.
String of pearls. So in this particular context, it is probably too much for India to bite and to chew. But they may bite, but they will not be able to chew it.
Let
me give you the last thing. Chinese, on the other hand, they are controlling, and 49 is, of course, 49 is the goal they've set. The economy and the way these BRI, they are going, and the third thing is the way their progress in the technology and otherwise is there. So probably China will be, or India will be at loss to match that. So once they're at loss to match that, probably that will be the point that Indians will be again crying, the masses will be crying that what to do with this weaponry, because economically we have been thrown in the Bay of Bengal.
Now, let me put this question, and now this question is for both the gentlemen on Skype with us. Mandeep Singh Bajwa, first I would like you to answer, and after that, Dr. Aqab Malik. Let me put the question now. I was listening to a very interesting, a very long lecture of General Bapit, and interestingly, he spoke about the clash of civilizations there. He said, well, there is a Japanese civilization, there is a Sino, there is an Orthodox in Russian side, then you have southern side of the African, and then the Muslim civilization starting from Morocco all the way till Indonesia, including countries like Pakistan. Then the Hindu civilization in India, talking about the Western civilization where the Western Europe, Australia and Canada and America were there. Then the South American. So now it seems that this is going to be a clash of civilizations. That's what he talked about. And honestly speaking, sir, after the, this development regarding the AUKUS, it seems that it is indeed, because Japan has been kept out, India has been kept out of Quad, whereas even the French, for that matter, the white men, the British, Americans and the Aussies, all together. Do you think, sir, something which was said by our former Chief of Army Staff and the current head of the defense, General Rawat, what would you say about it, sir? Is that what India is preparing for?
I think Huntington's theory of the clash of civilizations has been debunked so many times that it's serious to hold any interest for any serious.
So this is coming from your chief.
Scholars. And if it's the world is a global village. I mean, there's so many common interests. I mean, if you're talking about the Islamic civilization in Pakistan and Hindu civilization in India, I mean, look at the points of commonality. I mean, in India and Pakistan, we even speak English with the same accent. There is no Indian accent or Pakistani accent. There is a South Asian accent. I mean, there's so much together. As you so rightly pointed out, we watch the same movies, watch the same Italian dramas. I mean, how can you talk in terms of clash of civilizations, which is a very, very serious thing? But it doesn't really exist in the world. I mean, of course, all countries have their own strategic interests, which they take care to protect and defend. But to talk in terms of the clash of civilization, the white people versus the yellow and the brown in the middle, and the brown also split into Islamic and Hindu and all, I think this is mind-boggling. It makes no sense to me. And I think people of goodwill all around the world can still get together and make this a more peaceful, I'm not totally peaceful world, but a more peaceful world. And I think we are moving towards that. And, to talk in terms of apocalypse coming now and all, let's not think. I mean, these regional alliances, these strategic alliances are meant for this, to prevent such clashes. I mean, NATO and the Warsaw Pact held each other in thrall. They counterbalance each other. That's why I found that since the late 40s till the early 90s, when say the Soviet Union collapsed and the Cold War finished, there was no serious military confrontation. So, I don't think this theory of a new clash of relations holds any water.
All right, Dr. Kamalik, same point. Your take.
I actually completely agree with Mandeep. Clash of civilizations have been debunked many times intellectually in the academic community. I think a lot of people who don't understand the intellectual discussion within this and have not followed it through may espouse these ideas because they sound really good. But the fact of the matter is, clash of civilizations, these civilizations are not monolithic in any way whatsoever. You have massive differences within the Islamic world, for example, and they're always fighting with each other. You've got massive differences within the Buddhist world, for example. Orthodox world, the Europeans, for example, they're always at odds with each other in different aspects. The fact of the matter is, yes, there are some similarities between these countries and these so-called civilizational spheres, you could say, but this has been around for thousands of years, okay? And these ideas have mutually worked with each other. There's a certain degree of understanding. What happens is an idea builds up in a particular region and forms identity groups within that region and certain boundaries. And other ideas form boundaries, and those boundaries come to a certain form of interaction, but also friction. But our understanding these days with the internet, modern technology, interaction, transportation, movement around the world and connectivity has changed everything completely. The fact is, we are one world. Yes, there are many differences in ideologies, but they're not civilizational in any way whatsoever. You had, as Mandeep mentioned, the Warsaw Pact and the Western Alliance, NATO, for example. They were, if you understand Russia, it was actually European. It chose a different ideology, but that pulled them out of the European sphere because it had an ideological, systemic difference with capitalism. That is the reason why there was a Cold War, not because of civilization, not at all. In fact, China, which was Buddhist, and then obviously now more atheistic, but the fact is the Buddhist and the Confucian background was aligned with the Soviet Union. Now, how could
Anyway,
see the point
since I'm running out of time,
these ideas
Akab Malik, I'll also add one more statement from the Indian head of the defense, and he also said that the Sino and the Muslim civilizations, they are getting together against the Hindus, and perhaps this could be the next. I mean, this is the ideology he in fact launched. But I think it's a long debate. We'll definitely do another show, and I'll try to have our friend Mandeep Singh Bajwa and yourself, and along with Brigadier Saab to talk about it. But since I'm running out of time, I would like to say thank you so much, Dr. Akab Malik, and it was a pleasure having you, Mandeep Singh Bajwa Saab. And Brigadier said it was always good to have you on the show, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And that's all we have for this. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow at 8:05. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.